Hi, THMs. Welcome back to I'm a Recruiter podcast dedicated to empowering talent acquisition professionals like you. I'm your host, Prafulla Deori, head of talent acquisition at an MNC, and I'm thrilled about today's episode. I'm a Recruiter is a global community exclusively for TA professionals. Our vision is to build a premier global community for talent acquisition professionals, and our mission is to empower 100K TA professionals to evolve from recruiters to a trusted talent advisors. Unlike other communities, I'm a Recruiter is built by recruiter for recruiters. It is a genuine, safe space to exchange knowledge, connect with peers, find mentorship, discover job opportunities, etc. And if you enjoy the podcast, show your support by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Ready to join the thriving community? Fill out the form in the comment section. Let's redefine the landscape together. We are thrilled to have Abhilek Verma with us. With over a, with over a decade of experience in corporate training and business development, Abhilek is a founder of Abhilek Verma Consultancy, OPC Private Limited, and has made significant contribution at KPMG Consulting. Abhilek leads a recruitment and upscaling startup that connects recruiter with students seeking internship and jobs while also providing training in soft and hard skills such as AI, IoT, and Salesforce. He holds an MBA in marketing from ICFI Hyderabad and a personal branding certification from Spangless Academy in Singapore. His accolades include third prize at NIT Jamshedpur Startup Ideathon competition, a scholarship with LWT Academy, and participation in a Super AI conference at Marina Bay, Singapore. Additionally, he received an Above and Beyond award at KPMG Gurgaon for exceeding 3 crore rupees in a year. We are excited to delve into this Abhilek's journey and insights. So, welcome, Abhilek. So, why don't you quickly introduce yourself?
So thank you, Prafulla, for a great introduction and thank you for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be at I Am Recruiter. So we've been building great things and I'm looking forward to enjoy times with you. I'm Abhilek Verma and as you have mentioned, I've had over a decade experience more into corporate trainings and working closely with L&D and stuff like that. But then my history comes back more from where I was purely lacking in terms of doing networking. So I was more like an introvert where I couldn't gel up with people, do such kind of those small talks and things like that. So I joined a lot of public speaking events. I used to go to a lot of things, and that's how I started working on my communication skills. And then I found marketing doing much more better than picking up finance on HR. So I love talking to people, doing networking and all. But then I used to work with a lot of HRs because as part of the training and things like that, right? So that's how I started my career, and I worked with the government of Telangana as well as government of Andhra Pradesh in the IoT space as well because I was very passionate about Internet of Things, and that's how I came to know about AI/ML and the current ecosystem, which is super important right now. So before starting my company, I just received close to 3,500 resumes in 1 year for students asking for reference in job. Was when I was in a startup and also at KPMG. So all these years I was trying to think, let me solve this bigger problem, and that's one of the reasons I started last December my startup, which is into AIML and trying to bridge that gap between academy and corporate. Right. So that's a brief about me, and I'm looking forward to enjoying the conversation with you.
Sure, sure. So, you were born and brought up in which place, and currently you are located in which place?
Yeah, so I was born in a very remote place called Begusarai in Bihar. So it's like 100 kilometers from Patna. My hometown is Jamshedpur, right? So I keep traveling from Jamshedpur, but then I am based out of Hyderabad, where
Okay.
my incubation is there with City Hyderabad. So that's where my startup is, the office space and things are.
Great, awesome. And good to know that you are from that part of the world. And since you are also starting your own organization, definitely looking forward for more insightful discussion. But having said that, wanted to
Sure.
know a little bit more about your background in terms of education and like what you have done in terms of study and all those things, and how you were during your school days or college days.
I was very much fascinated with studies. So I was like someone who was very much engrossed into studies. I was in Begusarai, India. I took commerce, but then I realized finance is too tough and I should move back to marketing. So I went to KIT University in Bhubaneswar. I did my
Okay,
graduation BBA in marketing. That's where I learned a lot of things, networking. I met a lot of foreign students as well. So I
okay,
remember a friend of mine who was from Turkmenistan, and we used to conversate a lot in English. So that's where I really upskilled my communication skills, because he used to understand little bit Hindi, and we were not that conversate with him in English and stuff like that. But then that was one of the good thing. And then I did my MBA parallelly after my BBA, which was again in marketing from ICFA Hyderabad. Parallelly, I was also studying company secretary because I also had a passion for law, along with little bit of accounting and finance. So I did a couple of levels. I left CS, but then yes, I had a good networking with a lot of ICSI chapters in Bhubaneswar and also in different other cities. So my background is more, you can say, a mix of everything. But then luckily now my startup is more into recruitment and upskilling. So again, coming back to the HR and tech part. Yeah.
good to know. Good to know. I would say that definitely, like you have mentioned, it mix of everything, right? Starting from commerce,
Right.
finance background, then marketing, then again, like now coming to like IT and recruitment and other things as well. So, since you have seen
Yeah.
all of these phases, right, or functions, like which functions you like the most?
I think the most sorted one is marketing. That's what. So I mean, you get to meet a lot of people. You get to physically travel. I mean, I really like traveling. So like when a company sponsors your trip, right? You go to another city and meet a lot of people. So I found marketing as one of the fascinating. But then I would not say HR is also not fascinating, because again, you get to understand people, and if you can really understand people and understand their emotions, you can really do well in your career. So I feel marketing in HR has always been one of the fascinating things I've always wanted to become, and wanted to utilize my skill set. So these are the two important ones I would like to highlight.
Good to know. Good to know. And you have also mentioned that initially you were kind of introvert, right? And what are the
Yeah,
different things you have done so that you could have come out of your those foundation and all those things, right? And the reason why I'm
right.
asking this question is many of our recruiters are
Mhm.
in day-to-day work. We talk to multiple people, but in general when we try to deep down little bit more, most of the recruiters are kind of introvert. They're not very comfortable talking to
Right.
people as well. So just trying to break the barrier to understand what you have done so that we can set some example for those recruiters as well.
I think the easiest I can say is like, get to know a lot of people. So I used to register for meetup.com. That time there were no WhatsApp groups where we know like, okay, there's I am recruiter, who's doing podcast and things like that. So luckily it was more on referrals, and you could get things. LinkedIn was not that much popular in 2000. I'm talking about 2008 and 9, when I was just completing my 12th. So I remember like when I was in school, it was very tough for, conversating and let's say, talking about some random topics. We didn't have to talk about politics that time. Politics was not that much as a important thing, or a cricket, things like what we talk right now. But then yes, one of the key thing which really improved my communication skills is meeting a lot of foreigners, maybe online or offline, and talking with them. So I used to do blogging, so that really helped me. And I used to also sit with a lot of VCs. They used to give me some small ghostwriting work. So I used to conversate with someone who is in China, and I used to, see like, oh, my English is better than them, right? So then I used to say, oh, I still can improve their English by teaching them something like that. So I started teaching all these foreign countries a little bit of spoken English, and that's where I started improving my English as well, because I realized there's a gap between different countries. Just like we have mother tongue interference, like how we pronounce words and things like that. But then when I went to London and UK, like to conversate, who used to give some review for my books, because I was also a book writer. I wrote, in fact, a book on introverts hidden meaning, and did a research of around 16,000 profiles
Okay.
in multiple countries. So that's where I realized like, okay, like I have to convert from an introvert to an ambivert. I can't say I can really convert to an extrovert, but that's how I realized I really have to network. So I used to, when I was in college, I used to just spend a lot of my time in meeting new people, whether it's offline or
Okay.
online. Every day I used to have like a target of, let's say, I need to talk to two new people, right? And that's how
Okay.
I said, like, okay, I have 300 plus days. Let's say I'll be, giving the sleeping cycles and all. So 300 days, so I can meet 500 to 600 people in a year. And that's what I've been doing since 2008 and 9. And that's how my LinkedIn has also grown, in terms of networking and things like that. So I have had chance to interact with close to 33 countries, to talk about their culture, to know about those things, and also publish a couple of books on Amazon. That is one of the reasons why I was able to move from an introvert life and then try to conversate on that same wavelength with other extroverts and things like that.
Okay, great. Good to know. Thank you for
Yeah,
the tips. I would say. Uh, Again, like the next thing which I wanted to ask you is, like, since you have already started your startup, so definitely there is some kind of problem statement you are trying to solve, right? So when did you
right.
realize about that particular problem, and when did you thought that what is the next step you need to take? Because there are many people who have ideas with them, but they don't know how to
Correct.
start. So can you give some tips or share your journey as well
Yes.
along with the tips?
Sure. The company name Abhilek Verma Consultancy was there since 2014 when I was, probably going to graduate from MBA. So I wanted to do something in consulting where I can really, help people. But then the idea of recruitment and, let's say, very specific to solving this problem came 3 to 4 years before, when I mentioned a lot of profiles. I used to receive people asking for internships, jobs. So I saw this as a bigger problem. And another thing, what I realized is, since I have network, it's pretty easy for me to connect people, right? So that was my most easiest conveyance thing. So I thought, why not make a business model on this? And then I started doing a little bit more chat GPT workshops. So that also helped me to connect with a lot of universities. In fact, think about, like, I have a session with Microsoft Chicago just sitting in India, right? So it's just because of this online presence, right? They coming to me and saying, like, why don't you organize a session for us? So this is all because what I believe is, being open to criticism and also open to improve yourself. So that has also improved my thing. So I joined little bit Toastmasters also, to improve my elevator pitches for 7 minutes and things like that, right? So those are also some nuggets I can share which I did. And I did a lot of podcasts. So I also went to a lot of shows online in different multiple countries. So that also improved me as a person to understand where I'm lacking and where I can improve. So these are some of the nuggets I have. But then, on a nutshell, what I can say is, we shouldn't think about, let's say, what the problem is. Just think around whatever the challenges people are facing next to you, right? Don't think about a larger problem. First, think about the small problems. So let's just see your surrounding. I'm sure you will find a startup idea more
Yeah.
easily, and then you go to those VCs and angels, and then let them advise you, whether your idea can be improved and things like that. So that's how I started improvising and maybe building something over the tech, because that's how I got my incubation. Because if you build something over tech, it's pretty easy to get an incubation and a government funding and things like that. So that's what I've been working with a lot of VCs and angels. They've been guiding me and supporting me that way.
Okay. Since you have mentioned about
Yeah,
your incubation as well, so how was the story behind, like what you did? How, because you were from marketing background, then you started your own
right.
organization. So how do you manage to get and start the tech side of the things?
I think one of the key passion which I had was traveling. Okay, so when I was, like, doing installations in IoT, Internet of Things, I was taking the temperature sensors, traveling to Bangalore airport, installing for Air India Sats, or for large organizations and hotels like Novotel and Karachi Bakery and all. So I realized, like, there's also something new I need to learn. That time, Chat GPT was not there, but I realized there is something called as machine learning and artificial intelligence, right? So I started learning that, because when you come from a non BTech background, right, you really need to have an upper edge over everything. So when you try to compete with BTech students, you really need to be strong at the technical part, right? So I can't do that beautifully coding which probably a BTech graduate can do, right? So I started learning a little bit on coding. I started a little bit on prompt engineering, right? So that's where things improved a lot. And then I think, yeah, one of the key importance what I've found with my startup was everything was falling into the place. When I applied for an incubation, my idea was super strong, and it was accepted much quickly because I think it was solving a larger problem. Though there was also a competition doing this same company which has funding from USA, which was our competitor. But then I started bringing rewards management as one of a point of difference, where we give vouchers and let's say try to motivate the human resource and recruiters to work closely with us. So that because I understand from a corporate training point of view, like we always want to go to some retreats and things like that, right? So that's where I know the pain area of employees and things like that. So I brought rewards management into the picture, and that's where I got my incubation and things like that.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So
Yeah.
can you also brief little bit more this step by step, because definitely you have seen that, you have done that, right? So just wanted to uh, slice down little bit more in terms of
Mhm.
incubation step by step. Like for you, it might be very easy because our audience might not have those kind of context. They might not have or seen those kind of things. So can you break little bit down the problem, and how from idea to incubation, how what was the journey?
I think the journey was tough, just like every founder has, right? So a lot of rejections with a lot of IITs and IIMs you get initially, because you realize like, okay, you really need to be on the top of everything before getting selected with triple IT. So yeah, the journey was a bit difficult, but then I had a lot of support with mentors and a lot of people suggesting me like, okay, you need to tweak a little bit in your idea. You need to make some changes. You need to, because initially when I thought it could be just a consulting company which solves a problem of, let's say, trainings, soft skills, and then what challenges all the students, or let's say the freshers face, right? But then I realized I have to solve a much larger program, and it has to be put with tech, as I've been mentioning, right? So I have to use that tech tools and all, because when I used to apply to all these organizations, one of the key things what I really lacked was the tech part, right? Because they were more interested to know what I've been building on the tech part, right? So that's where my entire focus was before applying to the incubation. So recommend to anyone who is looking to apply for any incubation in any part of not just India but in the world, you really need to do something with tech. Whether you're using Chat GPT for some of the idea generation, whether you're enabling it in your website, or whether you're using it for a business generation, or let's say for PowerPoint creation or anything, right? But you have to enable that tech into your startup. That becomes much easier to get an incubation. But then yes, you really need to get rejections, because if you get accepted, then you'll always think like, I know everything. So it's also important to get rejected. I got a lot of rejections before getting one exception. So that's an important thing I believe everyone should learn from that.
Okay, okay. And many people are not able to handle the rejection as well, right? So how did you
Yeah.
handle the rejection?
I think I'll give you a simple number. So let's say I've done close to 60 public speaking sessions on generative AI, in this past 1 year. Right. So I applied to around 250, like applications for public speaking, right? I got rejected at closely 80, right? That's a big number, right? But then out of that 170, I secured that 60. The next one, which is with Azure Pune and, Azure Chennai this weekend, right? So they reached out to me now, because earlier they couldn't facilitate that training, right? So I believe even if you are rejected in the past, the organizer will still keep in touch with you, right? So regardless of you getting rejected for incubation per se, you still can be part of that ecosystem. You can find some mentor and things like that. I got rejected with one of the IMs, and luckily that IM's startup is mentoring me, right? Though I didn't qualify to go get an incubation, but one of the startup founders found my profile a bit relevant to what he does, and then he saw like, let me mentor you. So I believe you need to learn from your rejections regardless of what happens. So even if you have a lot of rejections, you can still use that information, or probably get some network and get that ecosystem to enter, right? So you talk about Assam startups, you talk about Guwahati, as one of the hub, for example. So I also applied for mentorship. I got in, right? So a lot of places you will find there is an opening for mentorship. You have to keep applying regardless of what is the result or what is the outcome, right? You don't have to think like, what if I got rejected from two or three, so that doesn't mean I cannot apply to the remaining three or four, right? You have to keep persistent. You have to always keep applying. That's the easiest way I've seen. So I have had some training with Tony Robbins, Unleash Your Power from Within, and I have seen that person, like talking about rejections all the time. A lot of people in their daily sales job, they get rejected, but that doesn't mean they don't stop cold calling. They don't stop sending emails. They don't stop reaching out to a lot of people, right? So it's part of job. Everyone has got it. Zuckerberg didn't create Facebook just out of blue moon, right? He also might have got rejected from somewhere. So everyone gets rejections, but it is about you, how you try to come out from that and use it as a positive asset rather than a negative thing, and try to network with people. That's one of the key aspect I see. Whether you're getting a rejection with let's say an incubation, or let's say with a speaking session, you still can network and find a way around to be part of the ecosystem. And tomorrow they might invite you for a session, right? And that has happened to me in the past as well. So I believe it's about utilizing networking, right? Connecting with a lot of people on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is one of the greatest gold mine, I can say. So LinkedIn is one of the important thing. You can network with a lot of people that way.
Okay. So you have been emphasizing in networking for quite a long time now, from the starting of our
Yeah,
conversation, right? So the one problem which I have heard from people, right, during multiple different sessions and other things, right? People hesitate to start the conversation, right? They don't know what to talk.
right.
So since you are good with networking, any tips for our audience?
I think the easiest thing is don't think about who is on the other side. Just think about he might be someone who might be a friend of someone else, right? So, what do you do with someone who's a stranger? You just have an icebreaker session. You just talk about, what's happening. Let's say the weather. Let's say, what's happening in your country. So I remember cracking a deal with someone in Zimbabwe. I know nothing about Zimbabwe, as a country, but then I realized there might be chances of, let's say, talking about gender inequality, poverty, right? So some other things which are very common, which I can
Common.
talk about. So I started to find a common ground, and we started conversating. And then the client, asked me to do some mentorship and a training for them. So it's about just understanding, like, don't think about who is on the other side, what designation they are in, or let's say, what work they are doing. Just think about how you conversate with a normal friend, right? Find a common ground. If you find a common ground, it's becomes super easy, because there might be also chance that the other person might also feel uncomfortable sharing things with you. So how do you make the other person feel comfortable? The moment you make the other person feel comfortable, automatically the friendship happen. And that's how you select friends in your school, right? You don't become friends with everyone. You try
Yes.
to first crack a conversation and then see whether there is a feasibility or not. It's the same thing, it's the same thing with dating, in fact, right? You don't just find someone and then you say, like, I want to be with this person. So it's about test and try, right? So the same thing happens with human beings. So if you can understand the psychology, I think that would really make things much simpler for everyone.
Sure, sure. Great, great, Abhilek. Very nice advice, I would say. Even in recruitment also we try to do the same thing, right? When we try to connect with any of the candidate, we try to see his profile and try to talk to those similar points which I can relate to, so that I can start a conversation. So this is how I build my connection with my candidates. And definitely you are also seeing the
Perfect.
same thing, right? Okay, great. So again, talking about little bit about like the startup again, like in terms of, so I have been talking to multiple different founders as well, so where they talk about like building a MVP product, right? So once you have a like idea, right, what is the next step? Like, is it like, because for me, I'm hearing that you should have your own MVP product and all those things, then you can go to the next step. So what do you think?
I think no. I mean, it's not necessary you need to have MVP. MVP is necessary if you're applying to an accelerator program, or let's say you're applying for a funding and things like that, right? So or a grant, right? So there you need a minimum viable product. But then what I would say is, like, if you have an idea, there are still a lot of pre-incubations, like different ecosystem where you can apply. There are still a lot of mentors who can still guide you to move from an idea to a POC or to an MVP stage. So it's not necessary you need to have everything, let's say, in the first thing. It's think about, like, you're building an idea, right? So tomorrow I don't expect you to design a full-fledged WordPress website with a WooCommerce, where you can have a an e-commerce platform, like people can go and buy your solution, right? It can't happen. They say Rome was not built in a day, right? So it's the same
Yeah.
thing. So you have to keep working on an idea, but then eventually the whole aim is to get into an MVP, because ultimately when you go to meet investors, they would look more on the MVP. Idea is not going to be taken that seriously. So you really need to find a program where you can be part of to move from. So now if you just Google it, you'll find there are at least, I know, 200 plus programs in India right now which can teach you how to move from idea to MVP. In fact, they're charging as well. Earlier it was free. Now they have made it as a full-time business, right? So you talk about
Okay.
IMA Ventures, they charge 1.5 lakhs just to move your idea to MVP, right? So
Okay.
I know, like, no, this is also a business model which people want to know from idea to MVP. But then, yeah, I mean, you can find a lot of people who do, pro bono, or what I say, volunteer mentorship. So you can at least find them just in case you don't have budget to, invest in such large programs. So then you can then be ready to reach a situation where you have the budget and then get across the best programs in the world, right? So that's one of the suggestion I would have when it comes to moving from an idea to POC or an MVP, right? So that's the whole crux of it.
Great. Good to know. Good to know. So the reason why I'm also asking you is since we are building this community, right? So we want to build a world-class community for our TA fraternity, right? And we are
Right.
quite new. We just have an idea. We are trying to solve piece by piece by doing multiple different things. So since you have similar kind of experience or little bit more than in building the organization and all training wise, so we thought that definitely you will be the right person to give us some guidance as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's always about collaboration. So, I'm always open for collaborations where I can also improve my skills, and we both can improve the lifestyle of a TA, because I know I had also a chance to do staffing, by the way, for a year, where I was probably, trying to fill up some positions with HP. So yeah, it was one of the toughest time because we had targets to source some resumes, and I understand that pain. I've not had that kind of experience of maybe a decade into recruitment, but then a year I was there. So I understand the pain of, you inviting a candidate and then that candidate ghosting you. So I know a lot of challenges which is there. But then, yeah, it's part of life. Everywhere it's like a two-way thing. So that's how life is, So you have to have a large data set of, let's say, the candidates and things like that.
Good to know. So, Abhilek, so when you were not working, so what you love to do?
I think, yeah, one of the key things what I really like is blogging, and also, like, I run Hyderabad Foodies, so I am a big foodie, right? So
Okay.
since 2013, I've been working with a lot of restaurants, hotels, giving them some ideas on putting their things on a digital space, right? So even if you see a very small vendor shop, I would suggest them some ideas, how they can really market it well, whether it is a small shop or a large shop. So yeah, I mean, building anything about food, anything about meeting people over coffee. So these are some of the hobbies which I always do. It's all about networking at the same time. Other than that, I love badminton. So that is also one thing I really like to play. Right? But then, yes, I mean, there are a lot of skills which I do. But then I try to, focus more on also journaling and reading a lot of books as well. So that also helps me to upskill myself. So that these are also some of the hobbies which helps me to think about other areas of scope of work and things like that.
So, when you mention about different books, what kind of books do you love to read, and like what kind of books you would love to recommend to some of our uh, recruiters?
I think not specific just to recruiters, but then to a overall mass. What I can mention is, 48 powers of law, 48 laws of power by Robert Greene. This is a fantastic book, where you can learn about how you can really, make people work for you, or let's say you work for other people, but how you can be super effective. So there are different laws of power, which everyone can learn and they can implement in their life. So this is one book I am really, loving it. Then there is a lot of self-help books, which I'm sure everyone knows, like The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari,
Yeah,
So this has been one of my favorite books, But then, yes, I mean, when you come to business leadership, there are a multiple tons of gurus out there, whom you can learn. So when it comes to, let's say, recruitment or let's say sales, I look up to Jordan Belfort, where he has some very interesting tactics that helps me to engage with people, because again, human resources is also about engaging. All right, so how do you engage people, how do you develop your tonality and things like that. So I have learned a lot of things from Jordan Belfort. The Straight Line of Persuasion, it's a course, plus parallelly there's a book also available, on Jordan Belfort's all those tricks and tactics. So that will help a lot to the recruitment space, and also to people who are trying to sell, or let's say trying to get candidates or doing something for their organization and things like that.
great, great. Thank you so much, Abhilek. So, Abhilek, again, like coming back to the incubation center, right? So,
Mhm.
like in a day, since you were part of the incubation center, so even you have other works as well. So, how do you manage? How do you cope up with your time and all those things? And how much time
I
required for the incubation center?
I think one of the key things is maybe keep it whenever you want. So incubation is all about when you need it, right? It shouldn't be like you go daily to the office. It will depend if you have a business meeting, let's say in a different city, so you travel, right? So I don't keep something very fixed how much time I'll use at incubation, but then we get something like 6 hours as a complimentary to do meetings, which is in rooms like having eight or 10 spaces, of people. So I can do a lot of such productive meetings. Parallelly, we have a 150 and a 75 seater conference room whenever we want, whenever it is free, we can book it. So these are all complementary to the deep tech program. I'm part of Triple IT. But then, yes, I mean, the co-working space is chilled because you can go anytime. You can network with a lot of Microsoft or let's say ISV founders, who sit close to me. So there are some very interesting people. Atal Incubation Center is also there. So there are some good funded programs also there. So I believe having a timeline, like making sure when to do mentorship, when to take up trainings, and when to solve the problem of startup. So that has to be divided maybe one third each. That's what I do. So I try to divide because I don't want to mess it up by doing everything. So I try to outsource a lot of my tasks to some of the interns. That saves a lot of my time. Right. Parallelly, I also find an executive assistant from different countries, so they can really take care for my calendar and things like that, right? So these are some important statistics needed, but then I don't have a very fixed schedule when it comes to how many hours I need to spend to incubation. It's again flexible, so depending upon when I need it, I go there. When I don't need it, I don't go there. So but then yes, the good part is when I'm very much needing for a, let's say, a space to do meetings, let's say with a lot of people, I would love to organize a proper workshop. I did one with some audience on AIML. So looking forward to do some more workshops and stuff like that. So that's where I put a lot of hours, because to organize a workshop with, let's say, 100 200 people, you really need to be focused. So I spend more energy when there's a lot of workshops and things like that. And sometimes to network, I just go and just chill out and things like that.
Okay. And just wondering, right? So Abhilek Verma Consulting and the startup in the incubation are both different entity, or it's the same part of the same entity?
No, so Abhilek Verma Consultancy is just a single entity, right? So all the incubation is on the same name, right? So all the
Okay.
incubation which I get is on the startup thing. But then when you talk about, let's say, mentorship, so you talk about Vadhvani Foundation, other startups, in different states and all. So whenever I apply for them, I mention them, like I am also a startup. So I make it very clear, like I'm also learning, right? So there are only the areas which I will support is marketing and sales. Okay, something related with tech, marketing and sales, right? So I cannot recommend someone, let's say, though I am coming from a commerce background, but I cannot say like I'll do all your portfolio analysis and finance and things like that. So I make it very clear what is my expertise before I taking up a mentorship role, because whatever I have done in the past decade, it becomes super easy to translate to someone who's just a budding entrepreneur or who's just starting out fresh. They know how to reach out, but they don't know how to convert, right? So that's where my expertise comes in. I train them to ensure that it's not just a lead, but then a closure, right? So because I've been into some large organizations like KPMG training, in terms of closures and also in terms of engaging with clients and things like that. So I've been trying to focus more on the closure part rather than just the basic of lead generation. So those kind of mentorship, I make it very structured and provide it to the audience. So I have had recently a conversation with someone who's a student entrepreneur who's based out of Philippines. They had an
Okay.
exact same idea which my startup has, right?
Okay.
But it's an idea, right? It's not someone which has implemented. They have clients and things like that, but they understand better the Philippines market. So I am just collaborating with them to help them to enter into Singapore, India, and other Southeast Asian countries. So it's like a collaboration with them, right? But I am also their mentor because we met at Vadhvani Foundation, right? So I'm just saying, like, you have to be open to opportunities, but parallelly, even if there's a competition, you can still collaborate, right? So one suggestion would be for podcasters out there is find as many competitors, find as many people who are in this recruitment state, and try to collaborate more, see it offline, online. I think that really will add a lot of value, because again, I can recommend there's a lot of podcast happening in recruitment space, a lot of technology things happening in that, right? But then sometimes they don't invite each other, and that's what one of
Yes.
the strangest part I've seen right now. But then in sales, when you talk about sales, we love inviting people who are in sales, right? So that's what, because we like to network, right? So
Yeah.
but then
Yeah.
yes, I mean,
Yeah.
this could be a good strategy I would recommend for you, because I believe, like, there might be you get access to their list of clients, they get access to your list of clients. So it's a win-win situation for both the parties. That
Totally agree. Totally agree.
yeah.
I would say about another community similar to us.
Mhm.
We did reach out to them, but they were kind of like not very comfortable. And there are few community members uh, whom we joined through WhatsApp and other groups. So they kind of delisted us from their WhatsApp group and all. So I
I
do
understand.
understand what
No,
you are.
I'll get you one. I did a podcast with one of the organization whose tool actually I use it for my startup. So I'll get you one to connect with. They also hosted my podcast. It was a LinkedIn audio session. So I'll connect you with one who are purely into recruitment space, and I'll make sure you get a chance to work with them as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
so I'll ensure you have something a competitor, but then yes, they would love to work with you.
So it's always like win-win situation, which you have told, right? We all are learning
Correct.
at the same time, right?
Right. And it
Someone
becomes
might have
easier.
some
I mean,
other advantage.
right. I mean, it's become
Sorry.
easier because your network is large, their network might also be large. So you both collaborate. So the both the network becomes together, right? So that's always good. The reason why I choose this Philippine startup is I know I don't have any experience in Philippines. I have little bit limited knowledge right now, but with their help, I can also enter Philippines. There's a big market out there, right? So every country is unique. So similarly in recruitment space, definitely there's a lot of, but yeah, I mean, people have to change. People have to believe that it's not competition, rather it's a collaboration, and that's what the
Yes,
difference
yes,
between two
yes.
C's are, right? So that's an important.
That's true. That's true. I totally agree. Even in one of my previous podcast, one of the co-founder Hari.
Yeah.
He's building a company name called Tidy Hire product.
Hmm.
So he also mentioned the same thing, right? It's like initially when he started his organization, he was very tense with the competition and all. But later, what he found it that instead of competing with each other, we can complement each other, right? And
Correct.
he suggested me the same thing which you are suggesting, Abhilek.
Right, absolutely. I mean, you see Facebook, Google, Microsoft. I mean, they do compete, but that doesn't mean they don't go to events together. They also go to events together. They have all these programs, right? So everywhere they go together. So it's not that they don't are they're not connected. They don't talk to each other. They know, like one person might apply at this program, they might get selected, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't apply at this program. So it's not a non-compete kind of an agreement. So if you join Microsoft any of the programs, you can still join Google program, right? So that's the important part of competition. You can always choose whom you want to work with, right? So that's the same thing. All the recruitment out there, I would like them to address, like it's a great thing. You're also building something new. Prafulla is also building something amazing. So it's always good to collaborate because ultimately it will help in the long run. We're not thinking about just the short run, but then it's a long run where you will get similarly prospects who might need your solutions tomorrow. So there's always a win-win situation for both the parties.
Totally agree. Totally agree, Abhilek. So, like while building a startup or building a community, right, you need lots and lots of focus, lots and lots of energy, right? And
Right.
sometimes you feel like you are drained out, right? So, what you do basically to keep yourself pumped up?
I think there's always a learning curve, as I mentioned, like like rejections, or let's say people asking a lot of information, you don't have it. Like, so I had a investors meet recently, and they asked me like a hell lot of information, term sheets, balance sheets, everything, right? So I was able to provide little by little, but at the end they said we don't invest in recruitment space, right? So that's a hard part. You have to do that. You have to they said we are very much interested only in deep tech, that too in enterprise, right? So but then I put all my energy, I put everything, but then it's a good learning for you, like what are the steps maybe in the future another investor might look into, which I might have not thought about, which I might have thought, oh, I just need to send them a pitch deck, they will then evaluate and things like that. They sent me a bunch of questions which I have to do a lot of research and come back with the answers and stuff like that. So I believe, like, even from your negative experience of, let's say, not getting the funding, or let's say not getting the money, you can still learn from a lot of things, because in the future it is again going to come back to you. Just like when you fail in an exam, right? It doesn't mean like tomorrow you're not going to pass in the exam, right? It's just that specific time period. So you have to learn from your failure. So that's one of the thing I learned from my negative experience which I get. So I mean, one of the key things what I would say is the pressure, you should have to quickly adapt to different situations, right? So that pressure you have to take it out, and then you have to meet other people's expectation, right? Because if you don't meet other person expectation, then you will become more stressed, right? So That's one thing I've been doing. So meeting others people expectations is important, but for that you really need to first be clear with what you want, and then yeah, doing mind blocking, maybe having 30 minutes or 1 hour with yourself every week, shutting down all your systems and just working on thinking what went good, what went wrong in the entire week, what could be better. Those are things which will really help you in the longer run that way.
Got it, got it, got it. So during our first discussion, Abhilek, you also mentioned couple of things about funding related stuffs and all, right? So
Right.
since I don't have any experience in those things, so can you also brief little bit about those so that our
Yes.
audience can find it useful?
I think yes. I mean, one of the key things with when it comes to funding is I'll not name, let's say, an angel investor, but then
Sure, sure, sure.
yeah, there's an angel investor, and they said to me like, you need to have three founders. If I want to invest 6 CR into your startup, right, your monthly recurring revenue should be 2 lakhs per month, right? So angel investors have very fixed mindset, like specifically if I have 1 2 3 checklists, then only we are going to talk on that level, right? But when you
Okay,
go to
okay,
VCs, okay, so VCs are able to sometimes adjust to what is there into the market, and they can probably revise few things, talking about equity and things like that, right? So different kind of organizations will have different kind of approaches. Someone will invest in SaaS, someone will invest in recruitment space, someone will invest in specifically deep tech, which is again very specifically to engineering technologies and things like that. So you need to know exactly what are the different sectors where they invest, and which are the ones who are sector agnostic, who can invest in anyone. So that is one I think I can recommend F6 programs. So F6 programs is one of the easiest way where you can just register and try to globally apply to a lot of funding. So when you register there, you can probably go and just put your profile out there. It will ask you some basic questions, insert your pitch deck, and you can apply to a lot of such scholarship and, let's say, grants, and also funding programs. At the end, regardless of you getting selected or rejected, it will be a learning exercise. So funding is all
yeah,
about a learning exercise. I've seen the ones getting a lot of funding, they got rejected initially, right? I
okay,
have someone whom I had an interaction. We were working when I was at KPMG. They were one of the prospects, kind of a client, right? And they recently got funding with Shark Tank India, right? So
oh,
I know,
nice,
like, people are going to be connected, and tomorrow, let's say, I aspire to go to Shark Tank India, I can take their help. I can ask them
yeah,
what went amazingly well for you. So it's a small world, right? You will meet out people who might complement your skill sets and things like that. So funding is all about patience, I believe, right? So it's not about you start a company today and then you'll get it. It is a 1 year process. 1 year you have to give to your startup. I recommend give 2 to 3 years to your startup. See as much as you can manage with the funds, though it is tough from, let's say, bootstrapping perspective. You can apply for a government grant that can really work that way, right? But then, yeah, I mean, having multiple sources of revenue will help a startup. So let's say, for example, I also do book writing, right? So I had few sales of people buying in US my book, right? So that is a
okay,
passive income, right? Let's say with Amazon. So I don't have to literally be online and convince someone to buy a book. It's just listed on Amazon, right? So these
yep,
are some of the ways for startup owners I recommend. This will help you to survive. You can have that, what we say in the term of runaway funds. So
yeah,
you will
yeah,
have that runaway funds for some more number of months, because you really can't focus on, I just want to have one revenue model. If it clicks in, I'll get the funding. It doesn't work around like that. You have to keep backup options, right? So
okay,
because you're living a corporate, you're living that lavish life which you used to have. So you have to take that hit. You have to take that, and obviously you have to stop thinking about all those kind of luxuries which you used to have. That is the hardest part when you are raising funds, because those funding is for your startup, right? So it's not for your own lavish life and things
personal
like that,
use,
right?
yeah,
Yes, personal use. So that funding you have to keep in your mind, that is only for showing that your startup is worth investing and things like that. So that money has to go everything on the startup. It cannot go to your own bank account and things like that. So that's one of the key thing which I recommend to founders to understand before they get funding. They feel like, wow, they have got so much money. So it's not their money. It's the money for using for the startup, right? So that has to be very clear to the startup founders.
got it, got it, got it. Great.
Yeah.
So, Abhilek, very nice discussion going. So, I'm bit interested to know a little bit more about your mentorship programs as well, because the
Hmm.
reason why we are asking about those things, because as a community, we see that there are certain areas where people lag. right? So
Right.
from your experience, we can also implement some of the things in our community.
Right.
So what some of the good things, some of the challenging moments during the mentorship programs of yours?
I think one of the key challenging programs in mentorship is, giving people enough number of hours to understand. Because just like we are conversating online, right? So there are few things I might have said you would have understood it perfectly well, but there are few things, you would still go back and cross check, whether it's actually there on the internet or not, right? So that's a human psychology. We go to
Yeah,
cross check whether
yeah,
genuinely that thing is there. Let me go and check it online or not, right? So that's a human tendency. So we have to understand from a mentorship perspective, whatever we try to put our thought process and things to someone else who's a mentee, they might not understand, they might not grasp that. Just like a teacher teaching mathematics, to a 10th grade, they're just out from 9, they're going to boards, and they might not have that much knowledge, to go there. So I believe, like, you have to first give the mentee proper time and make sure, like, they understand it pretty well, and they have to respect your time as well. Because sometimes when you offer mentorship, sometimes mentee don't respect time, so that becomes a problem, right? So that kind
yes,
of a boundary
yes.
should be there. They understand the value you're trying to bringing in. Because I have seen some of the VCs, which I have worked with, right? So they make sure, even if there's a call happening and let's say I don't attend a call, there's a penalty of money, right?
Okay.
Because it's their time wasted, and that's the
Yeah,
level
yeah,
of
yeah.
thing I have noticed, right? So that's kind of a seriousness you need to put across your mentee. Because you're trying to build someone's life, but it's also an opportunity cost for you. Because if you would
Yeah,
have not
yeah,
trained that
yeah.
person, you would have been in some other
Doing
place, maybe
something
working with
else.
some other clients, yeah, doing something else. So that's also something I would recommend when it comes to mentorship and stuff like that. But then, yeah, take up a lot of pro bono activities. I think that really helps, because you get a lot of variety of people. So I remember working with Dream Value Ventures, Global Dream Ventures, which is with Boston University in US, and they were a lot of immigrant consultants, and currently I'm working with one of the e-commerce website where a student is actually from China. He can understand Mandarin. His English is also good because again he is there in US, so he has learned that. But then I'm finding them some space, some interns, so that they can work with Indian crowd, right? And they can learn. But then, yeah, it's about the diversity also. So in mentorship, I believe is you have to have that diversity. If you focus on let me work with only, let's say, Indian crowd, you're not going to become a better person. So you have to keep
Okay.
changing your diversification in terms of working with multiple countries. I had a chance to work with Germans, I've had chance to work with Chinese, I've had chance to work with Italians, right? So different kind of people, you'll understand their culture, you'll try to know about more about them. And the good part is they'll be very sophisticated, right? So they'll be knowing, like, okay, this is the time they have to come and report. So I love working with a lot of foreign clients that way, because they know exactly what to do, and they always appreciate, right? But then sometimes in India, because of the challenge of timing and things like that, when there's a no show, so then people have to take it seriously, right? So
Yeah,
that's one thing I
yeah,
recommend in India, like, because there has been a lot of no shows I've seen in India specifically, right? So we have to.
yeah,
It's not
yeah,
me complaining about the entire India, but it's also me also being part of that ecosystem. Even I will also have a no show, right? Because sometimes if we let me leave it, we'll say some reason, just like how we take a sick leave, right? It's not a sick leave, right? But then you feel like, oh, I don't want to go to the office and things like that. So that's that attitude we always have. But then when I see other countries, they don't have that attitude. They when they commit, let's say for a particular time, they will come 5 minutes before. They will always be on top of it, and they will always make sure it happens regardless of whatever be the worst situation. And that's what I learn and love about the foreign culture. I'm trying to learn and make this enable in India as well, where we respect each other's boundaries and times, and then help each other grow that.
great, good to know. And how do you
Yeah.
connect with those foreign like students or your business or consultant? How do you make those connections?
So I think it's easy. I mean, you just find a specifically event. Let's say you go to Meetup, you go to Eventbrite, right? So all those websites where you have all those events happening, right? So there is one I can recommend. There is, FI School, right, which is there in 100 plus countries, and it's about all entrepreneurship. So you probably can go to someone who's based in Kenya, who's based in Japan, and try to, pitch your startup. There will be a couple of VCs and angels sitting. They will give some review. There will be someone who's a pitch expert. They'll give you something. But then in that meeting you're going to meet 50 other people who are from Kenya or who are from
Okay.
that specific country. So that's how you can expand your network, right? So these are some strategies I do, where let's say I want to focus on Japan and I want to talk to 50 entrepreneurs of Japan. I go to the largest ecosystem, let's say an incubation, which is in Japan, try to apply that, try to see if I can pitch in, I can share things, and I'll meet those people on that webinar or seminar, whatever it is. So I'm going to definitely meet that. So in the startup ecosystem, this is one way. Similarly, you try to segregate it, let's say in recruitment space. So you want to talk to L&D, learning and development, people who are recruiters or who are working closely with the managers who do all those travel and all those activities, which are very important for admin work. So you try to put those keywords, see what are the events they go to, and different kind of people, because everyone is ultimately connected. Because the more you attend
Yeah.
such events, the better, larger network you will have. And luckily, if I have all those countries working with me, so this podcast, I'm sure it will also going to go to a country where they might not have accessibility to know about such kind of knowledge, right? And that
Okay.
should be the end goal. So, and that is what I believe in, giving back to the people much more than what you can get, right? So when you give more, you get more, and that's the strategy I've been applying. If you give things for free, it's going to come back 2x back to you, right? So
Yes.
that's the
Yes. Yes.
strategy. I'm sure you will also agree with me. It is really
Totally,
amazing.
totally,
When you
100%, 100% Abhilekh.
right,
And
right.
thank you
So those
for
are the yeah.
and I as a
So
person believe in gratitude a lot,
right,
and it does come back. So thank you for sharing that, at least in the podcast
correct.
though.
Yeah, I mean,
Great.
I mean, a lot of people do, talk about a lot of things, but then I wanted to highlight this because this is also super important, because everyone is putting a lot of efforts. You're also putting a lot of efforts running this podcast show. It takes a lot of gut to come on camera and then, organize things and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it's a good job, and I believe this should always be appreciated.
Sure. Thank you so much. So with interest of time, I think we just have 5 more minutes to go. So
Sure,
before we wind up, right, any tips you want to give our budding entrepreneurs as well as a recruiter? Like,
sure.
definitely I can see that you are very good with like communication, you are good with networking, you're good with lots of different knowledge part as well. So any tips for our audience, Abhilek?
So I think for recruiters, one would be, I mean, timely updates. Though I understand from a logical perspective, the average timeline to see a resume is 6 seconds as per the global survey with Gallup, right? So logically, you cannot give feedback to every candidate, but then making sure that if a candidate gets rejected, just let them know they are rejected. Don't hang around with them. So this is one thing for the recruiter's perspective, or let's say aspiring recruiters who really want to get good feedback and things like that. And then yes, I mean, stay updated about the industry, know about what is happening in the industry, what are the needs of the job market, know about the psychology of people, why they will not work with you, right? Why
Yeah.
are they rejecting you? So everything matters, the way how you contact them, the way how you follow up with them, right? How you try to adapt to their situation, right? So this is a tip for fellow recruiters. When it comes to students, my suggestion is also give time to recruiters. Don't be aggressively following up. Don't treat them like a sales kind of a technology where you try to put something and then you get a result output like that. They are not chat GPT, by the way, right? So you don't give a prompt and you will get a result like you're selected
Yeah,
or you're
immediately.
rejected. Right. So you have to also be patient from a student point of view. But then yes, I mean, instead of thinking about, let's say, what's my job application status, think about what are the problems you're solving for the recruiter, because that's how you will become more connected with the recruiter. Just don't think about yourself, think about the larger problem. So just think about what you're trying to do for the recruiter industry as well, because that will help you to fetch the job much faster rather than just thinking about, oh, I just need to get the job. Maybe I send more number of messages, I might get a positive response. So that is a luck, and luck will fortune obviously the ones who put a lot of hard work. Right. So I believe like you really need to research your recruiter before even reaching out and making sure they are also comfortable while conversating. It shouldn't be like you chasing them, rather you should be so much of importance. They should be chasing you. And that kind of a first impression really matters. So for students, my idea is like, just think about all those things, and that will really help you to fetch your first job, because that's also something my startup does to help the students get their first job or internship.
Great. Awesome. Awesome. So before we wind up this call, I would
Yeah,
really take a moment and recall one of the sentence about failure, right? So most of
yeah,
the successful people, they talk about failure, but whoever have idea and all, they get scared and thinking that what will happen if I fail. but without
Correct.
failing you can proceed, right? So uh,
Right.
last tips on failure.
I think one of the key things is whenever you fail, you really need a lot of support and guidance from peers. So let's say if someone fails in a recruitment industry, what are the unique challenges you have solved? If you have not solved the unique challenges, you should still go back to a mentor, or let's say to someone who's a peer. They might have worked with you in the past, or they are currently working with you, and try to understand few more things how we can improve. So in failure, it's allowed getting the feedback, getting that support and guidance from that similar kind of a data set, or let's say a similar kind of thing. And then obviously knowledge sharing, I think that's one of the key things when I believe a failure helps. So obviously when you learn something, and you realize, okay, I have failed, you share it to five more people. People are very happy to
Yeah,
put on LinkedIn they have got XYZ, but they are not happy to put I have got rejected. Few student entrepreneurs doing that, which is amazing. Whom I train, they say like, look, I applied for this scholarship program, I got rejected. They put it on LinkedIn, and that takes a lot of guts, right? So these are the things you also need to put it on a large platform. The worst is you will hear people commenting, but that's not what it is for. It is for telling others, look, everyone will fail, right? In life nobody gets 100% sure shot thing always. I mean, you always wanted to become XYZ in life, but then when you see your past life, nobody becomes XYZ. They change, because what we dream in the childhood, we don't become that all of a sudden, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
one of the key things I believe in. So you always have to make sure you keep sharing the knowledge, regardless of whether it's a positive or a negative thing. The more you share it on social media platforms, the better the chances people will stick with you and will resonate with you, because people also like to see failures. They don't want to see that Instagram reels where you're just traveling and enjoying life, right? So that is a different thing. But then when you come back home, you go back to your mobiles, you don't talk to your family and things like that, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
they
yeah.
don't want to see that lavish things on the social media in front like that, but they want to be more real and realistic. So for that, knowledge sharing is the best thing when it comes to failure. And that I've seen a lot of startups coming into ecosystem where they say like, we have a idea which is about talking about, we'll only talk about failures. So there are a lot of startups which talk only about failures, and they are working on a business model and things like that. So yeah, that's what I wanted to highlight when it comes to failures.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Abhilek. Thank you so much for sharing all about your knowledge, about your experiences. It was definitely very interesting discussion. I have personally learned a lot and taken a couple of pointers as well as couple of notes as well, which I can implement for this community. And whenever time permit, definitely I would love to connect with you and looking forward for more similar podcast in future so that we can also learn from you how our journey is going. We can also share together those journey. But once again, thank you so much for your time and
Sure,
really
Prafulla. I mean,
grateful for
yeah,
being
it's
here.
an amazing experience for me as well. Thank you for inviting me and taking your efforts and time to put this show. I'm looking forward to once it gets viral. Hopefully, I mean a lot of recruiters will be happy, because I think there's few problem statements which you touched, and I'm sure they would get that justice through your podcast. So great job doing their podcast, and thank you for inviting me here.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much,
Thank
Abhilek.
you.